The forest didn't whisper that night. It held its breath, under a sky pierced by brittle stars. The wind curled through the tall pines surrounding the old mountain cabin, like it was searching for something. The porch creaked under the weight of stillness, and an old wooden chair groaned as John Mercer leaned back, blanket over his lap, coffee mug trembling in his hands. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he still held it like it was a lifeline. At 68, John had lived through war zones, buried brothers in arms, and learned to sleep with one eye open. But nothing had prepared him for this. Not for dying in a house that felt more like a mausoleum, wrapped in silence and memories too heavy to speak aloud. Stage 4. The doctors had been blunt. Maybe a month. Maybe a week. He didn't want hospitals. He didn't want sterile rooms or nurses with hollow smiles. He wanted the forest, the sky, the quiet. And if death was coming, it could come find him here where the ghosts at least knew his name. He coughed. Hard. The kind of cough that rips through the ribs and takes something with it. When he pulled the rag from his lips, it was wet with red. He stared at it for a second, then tucked it back into his coat pocket like it didn't matter. What a way to go. He muttered to no one. His eyes drifted up to the stars, those same cold lights he'd stared at during operations halfway across the world. Afghanistan, Kosovo, Colombia, all of them still alive in his mind. All of them blurring into a single thread that always led back to one name. Hope, not a belief, not a prayer. Hope had been his K9 partner, a German shepherd with a jaw like steel and eyes like firelight. Trained in detection, protection, search, and rescue. They'd run more missions than John could count. Hope always at his side, always silent, always ready. He remembered the exact moment Hope had thrown himself into gunfire, taking shrapnel to the ribs to protect the team. The military retired the dog after that, and they never let John see him again. Too much red tape. Too many policies. He'd never said goodbye. Another cough. This one worse. He leaned forward, wheezing, eyes squeezed shut. The pain was spreading now. It wouldn't be long. He sat back again, breath shallow, and whispered into the night, "I guess this is it." Then he heard it, a bark. Deep, sharp, familiar. John froze, his ears strained, disbelieving, then again. Closer, he turned toward the tree line. At first, there was nothing, just wind and pine. Then movement. Fast, focused. The shape weaved between the trees like a ghost wearing fur. Then, out of the darkness, a German shepherd broke into the clearing. Older now, gray peppering his muzzle. But the power in his stride, the fire in his eyes, it was him. It was Hope. The dog vaulted the fence like it wasn't there and sprinted across the yard, dirt flying behind him. He didn't hesitate. He didn't pause. He skidded to a halt in front of John and sat straight, still, sharp. John couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Hope raised one paw, rested it on John's knee, just like he used to before every mission. Hope, John whispered. The name cracked out of his throat, like lightning splitting open a memory. The dog looked up, amber eyes gleaming, waiting for a command. "You came back," John said, and his knees gave way as he dropped into a crouch, both hands cradling the dog's face. "You came back," double quotes in that moment. Under the stars, in the whispering pines, time bent. The old soldier and his partner weren't just together again. They were whole, and they had one last mission left. Hope didn't leave John's side that night. He laid curled by the old man's boots as the cold deepened, nose tucked beneath his paw, rising only when John coughed so hard it bent him in half. Then the dog would inch closer, eyes wide and watchful, as if tracking a threat he couldn't see but knew was there. John didn't sleep. Not really. Not after what he'd seen. He kept expecting to wake up in that VA hospital room, confused and alone. But when dawn broke gray and biting, Hope was still there, tail thumping softly against the porch as if to say, "Still here, soldier." The quiet was broken by tires crunching up the gravel road. John shifted in his chair, blanket pulled tighter, watching an old Chevy pickup crest the hill. A man stepped out, broad-shouldered, early 60s, clean cut but worn at the edges. He wore a faded sheriff's jacket with a patch that read K9 Unit Retired. John squinted. "You lost?" The man smiled and shook his head. "I think I'm exactly where I need to be." Hope stood up, trotted down the steps, walked straight to the man, sniffed his boots, then returned to John's side. "Guess he picked his team." The man chuckled. John's voice was hoarse. "Who the hell are you?" "Ray Delaney," he said, holding up a hand. "Retired K9 handler. Volunteer at the registry. You don't know me, but I know you. Or at least, I know your file. And I know that dog." John glanced down at Hope, then back up. "You brought him here?" "Not exactly," Ray said. "I just pointed him in the right direction." He stepped onto the porch, holding a thermos. "Mind if I sit?" John shrugged. "It's not my porch anymore. Belongs to the ghosts." They drank hot coffee in silence. Then Ray began to explain. 2 months earlier, Hope had turned up in a shelter 3 states away. Malnourished, scarred, older. He didn't bark, didn't eat, didn't play. He just slept by the door every night, like he was waiting for something that wouldn't come. When the shelter called the registry, I ran his tags, 17A, Ray said. Didn't take long to find your name in the declassified archives. And when I came to see him, I brought your old mission tapes. Ray smiled faintly. He didn't react too much. Until he heard your voice, John didn't speak. He stood up, Ray continued, walked to the screen, and let out this howl, long, low, deep. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He knew you were still out there. John stared at his coffee. "So I drove him within a mile of here," Ray said. "Unclipped the leash, opened the back gate, and he ran." Hope let out a soft sound and laid his head on John's knee. The old man's throat tightened. "I fought to keep him," he muttered. "When they retired him, I begged. They said no, too dangerous, too complicated. He disappeared, and I figured." Ray finished the thought. That he didn't make it. John nodded once. Hope shifted closer, and something broke open in the space between them. Not loud, not sudden. Just a quiet unraveling of pain long held tight. From that day forward, they were inseparable. Hope followed John through the cabin, helped steady him when he walked, barked at the medicine cabinet when it was time for pills. When John's hands trembled too much to open a bottle, Hope would wait silent, patient until the shaking passed. Neighbors began to notice. John, who once refused visitors, started waving 2 cars again. He cleaned the porch, ate full meals, laughed sometimes, even shaved. Hope brought more than company. He brought a reason. Every night, they sat on the porch together, just like they had after missions, watching the sunset fall through the trees. The wind rustled the leaves. The silence settled like a blanket, but nothing lasts forever. One afternoon, John collapsed, in a warning. Just a sudden drop, the coffee cup shattering, his body twisting awkwardly onto the kitchen floor. A stroke. Hope was at his side in seconds. He sniffed, whimpered, then ran bursting through the door and into the woods, down the trail he'd memorized, to the neighbor's cabin. 15 minutes later, John was being loaded into an ambulance. "You're lucky that dog didn't give up," the paramedic said. 10 more minutes, and we'd be telling a different story. John awoke 2 days later in the hospital, eyes blurry. chest tight. Hope was curled up at the foot of his bed when he saw him. John whispered through cracked lips, "You're still saving me, huh?" Hope opened one eye, yawned, and laid his head back down. He didn't need to say a thing. He was home. The hospital stay changed something not just in John's body, but in his soul. His speech had slowed. His grip had weakened, but his thoughts were clearer than they'd been in years. Mortality had always been a quiet presence in his cabin, like the ticking of an unseen clock. But now, it was ringing in his ears. Still, he wasn't afraid anymore, not with Hope there. Once discharged, John returned to the cabin with a new determination. He set up a desk by the window, dusted off the old journals he once couldn't bear to open, and started writing. Not for fame, not for legacy, just to tell the truth. Page by page, he unpacked memories that had sat for too long in silence. Raids, rescues, losses, names that still haunted his sleep, and always Hope was there. The dog lay beside him through the long mornings and quiet nights. Sometimes, when John paused, Hope would nudge his hand gently with his nose, as if to say, "Keep going." Other times, he simply watched his amber eyes full of knowing. Word spread. People began showing up at first, just neighbors dropping off food or checking in. But soon others came. A young mother who'd lost her brother overseas. An old Marine with trembling hands and hollow eyes. A teenager who didn't speak much, but sat on the porch listening for hours. They came not for sympathy, they came for the stories. And John gave them softly, without ego or drama. He spoke of fear, of bravery, of moments no war movie ever captured. And when he faltered, Hope would lay his head across John's foot, anchoring him in the now. Then came the invitation. The town librarian, a kind woman named Margot, had heard from one of the visitors. She reached out gently, asking if John might speak at the Veterans Day gathering. It would be small, informal, held in the converted firehouse that served as the local community hall. At first, John refused. Public speaking had never been his strength, and the idea of baring his soul in front of strangers felt too heavy. But Hope knew better that night, as they sat by the fireplace. Hope rested his chin on John's knee and looked up with those steady, patient eyes. John sighed. "You're not going to let me duck out of this, are you?" Hope wagged his tail once. So John said yes. The day of the event arrived under a sky painted in soft gold and blue. Folding chairs lined the old hall, the scent of coffee and worn wood filling the space. Flags hung on the walls. Veterans, young and old, trickled in. Kids in scout uniforms. Families in jeans and boots. John entered slowly, one hand gripping his cane, the other resting on Hope's back. You could hear a pin drop. He sat on a plain wooden stool. No notes. Just the journal in his lap and his partner at his side. He sat on a plain wooden stool. No notes. Just the journal in his lap and his partner at his side. "I'm not here to talk about medals or missions," John began, his voice raspy but clear. "I'm here to talk about what war leaves behind and who brings us back from it." He opened the journal and began to read. His words were simple, honest. He spoke of loss, of guilt, of the unbearable silence that follows war, and of a dog lean, strong, and stubborn who never stopped watching his six. People listened, not just politely, but fully. Some nodded. Some blinked fast, but the moment that broke the room came at the end. A small child raised their hand. "Did your dog ever do tricks?" John chuckled, the sound like gravel softened by time. "No," he said. "Hope never did tricks." He paused, looked down at his dog, then added, "But he did something better." Slowly, John reached down and tapped twice on his thigh. A signal no one else in the room understood, but Hope did. The old German shepherd rose to his feet, turned to face the flag on the wall, and raised his right paw in a sharp, precise salute. The room gasped, and no bark. No movement. Just silence and reverence. Hope held the salute steady, perfect as if years had folded into this single second. An older man in the back, a Navy vet with trembling hands, stood up slowly. We used to do that, he whispered. Before a breach. Right before the doors blew open. Others rose, one by one, hands to hearts or to brows or just to each other. Hope lowered his paw and returned to John's side, and for a long moment no one moved. Then applause, quiet at first, but rising like a wave of respect. Not for combat, not for glory, but for loyalty, for memory, for the soldier with fur legs who never forgot what it meant to serve. That night, as John returned home, the stars seemed brighter, the air lighter. He sat by the window, journal in hand, Hope at his feet, and he wrote the final line of the day. Some salutes don't need uniforms or trumpets. Some just need two souls who remember. The wind howled outside the cabin like it always did in December, sharp, wild, and full of memory. But inside, everything was still. Warm lamplight spilled across the wooden floors, casting long, flickering shadows over the old fireplace and the nearly finished journal lying open on the desk. John sat in his chair by the window, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. His breathing was shallow, each rise and fall of his chest more fragile than the last. The oxygen machine hummed beside him, soft, steady, until, with a flicker, it stopped. The power had gone out. In the silence that followed, Hope stirred from his spot on the floor. His ears twitched. His head lifted. He sniffed the air, then turned toward John. Something was wrong. John reached out, fumbling blindly for the flashlight on the table. His fingers brushed against it, then missed. He wheezed, clutching his chest, the pain sharp, radiating from his ribs like a wave crashing into his lungs. Hope stood in an instant, without hesitation. He dashed to the back of the cabin, teeth clenching around a thick canvas strap John had rigged to the emergency latch months ago. He pulled hard once, twice, until the back door clicked open. Snow rushed in. Cold air swirled around the room. Hope didn't wait. He bolted into the storm, down the hill, through the trees. He ran with the precision only a soldier could, dodging fallen branches, cutting through snowbanks, eyes fixed on the distant glow of a neighbor's porch light. When he reached it, he barked once, twice, 3 times. Urgent. Demanding. The porch light flicked on. A man stepped out in boots and flannel, squinting into the storm. Then Hope grabbed the man's sleeve and pulled. The message was clear. Come. Now. Minutes later, paramedics surrounded the cabin, their boots crunching across frozen ground. They stabilized John, restarted the generator, and reconnected the oxygen. A nurse whispered, "He's lucky the dog didn't give up." John's eyelids fluttered open. His gaze found Hope, sitting at the foot of the bed, drenched but alert, tail wagging once. John managed a smile, weak but proud. "You're still on mission," he rasped. "Still saving lives." Hope blinked slowly. That night, back home, John sat at his desk one final time. His hands trembled, but he wrote until the last word of the last page was down. He slipped the journal into an envelope and labeled it, "One last mission." Then, on a separate sheet, he wrote something else. "If I don't wake up tomorrow, don't mourn me. Just make sure Hope never ends up in a cage. He is not just a dog. He is a soldier. He is my brother. And if he ever lifts his paw in salute again, I hope someone remembers what that means." John signed it with a shaking hand, folded it, and then he slept When the sun rose over the snow-blanketed hills the next morning, the cabin remained still. The fireplace had burned low. The generator had run through the night, but John Mercer did not wake. He lay peacefully beneath his blanket, hand resting near the edge of the bed, and Hope was there, not pacing, not whining, just resting, his head gently placed on John's chest, ears alert, as if still listening for a command. Hours passed. Then, as if responding to something no one else could hear, Hope lifted his head, turned toward the door, and let out one single, sharp bark, then silence, a silence that did not feel like grief. It felt like completion. Days later, Arlington's veteran section stood still beneath a sky the color of steel. A coffin rested beneath a ceremonial canopy, the flag folded with reverence. Around it, dozens gathered: soldiers, friends, neighbors, strangers who'd heard the story and come to honor it. But it wasn't the medals or the folded flag that made the day unforgettable. It was the dog. Hope arrived alone, unaccompanied, without leash or command. He took his place beside the casket, like it was where he'd always meant to be. As the bugle played, and the flag was lifted, Hope stirred. He stepped forward, turned to face the casket, and raised his right paw precisely, cleanly, held high in perfect form. A military salute. The crowd gasped. A Marine in uniform near the front stood and returned the gesture. Others followed. One by one, veterans and civilians alike saluted the dog who had served without orders, without question. Hope lowered his paw slowly. Then, without a sound, he sat. In the weeks that followed, a bronze statue was erected near John's grave. It showed a soldier in full gear, kneeling beside a German shepherd. One paw raised, eyes forward. Beneath it, engraved in solid stone, read, "He fought with a brother in fur." Together, they never left a man behind. Hope lived out his days with honor, cared for by a young Marine who had served under John. But every Memorial Day, without fail, people would find him at dawn, lying beside the statue, head low, eyes closed, still watching, still saluting. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that not all heroes walk on two legs, then subscribe to Amazing Paws Stories, because the quietest salutes often carry the loudest meaning.